everyone, it's Kelly here. Welcome to my channel if this is your first time. Welcome back if you've been before. Lovely to have you either way. On this channel we talk books, and today I am wrapping up my reading for the month of July. Now, if we're going by numbers, July was a very productive reading month. And I did read some stuff that I really liked, but I also read some real duds. So let's talk about it. Let's talk through the books that I've read, and we can decide by the end of the video if this was a good reading month or a bad reading month. We'll see. We'll see. It was mixed. It was mixed. Okay, let's begin with the first book that I finished in the month of July, which was this very tiny little essay, which is called On Reckoning by Remeikis. I saw Amy speak at the South Coast Readers and Writers Festival, and this is the reason that I pulled this out, because that happened at the beginning of July. And I was like, what's going to be the easy win that I can definitely do before I see her speak? And it's this one. So this is a little essay which is about, so this was written following the situation that happened, and if you're not from Australia you may not have heard about this, but what happened was allegedly a staffer, political staffer, was sexually assaulted by a colleague on the grounds of Parliament House in Canberra, in our capital city, after hours, etc., etc. Her name was Brittany Higgins. I don't know if that name rings any bells for anyone outside of Australia, but if you're inside of Australia, it certainly will, because it was a massive court case, a series of court cases actually, that occurred because of this situation. However, this was a response that was written sort of in the midst of it all, when we had the response from our political leaders, and specifically from the Prime Minister, as well as from the politician whose staff Brittany Higgins was on at the time. And it was lackluster, I think, is probably the most generous way I could probably describe that response. And essentially, Amy Remeikis is at the time was a journalist who was very actively covering political press situations, and this was personally affecting for her because she is a survivor of sexual assault. So she was personally very connected to this story, and her response was one that many women in particular around Australia had to the comments that were made around this situation by our Prime Minister at the time, which were really lackluster, as I've said, but also, you know, he was able to find empathy when his wife suggested he think about it as though Brittany Higgins was his daughter, and that's where he was able to find empathy about this situation, and you know, to sort of launch some kind of a response to it. And really, that was very triggering for a lot of women who have been in sexual assault situations, and you know, have been met with this very, you know, ho-hum response of, oh no, that's so bad that happened. Now watch as literally nothing occurs, you know, to remediate that situation. So that was sort of the starting point of this little essay, and it is about rage, really, and it's about reckoning. It was really good. I gave it 4 stars, and she was an excellent speaker as well, so I would highly recommend listening to her speak about any political topic. She is very knowledgeable and very entertaining as a speaker as well. So highly recommend the book, and highly recommend seeing her speak if you can. The next book that I finished in the month of July was a book that I read for my book club, where we're attempting to read books from around the world. This month we were revisiting a country we had already done, which was China, because the book that we read originally, and China was the second country we did. We've been doing this for years. This was the second country we did, and the book that we chose at the time, all of us hated. We all really did not like. So this was sort of like a second chance choose your own adventure to try and redeem the literary culture of China. And I think, at least in my case, it was definitely successful. The book that I chose to read is this one, Strange Beasts of China by Yan Gi. It was translated by Jeremy Tiang. And one of the things that I discovered, because this is the first time I've ever read a book from this publisher, which is called Tilted Access, they seem like they are an amazing publishing company. There's a little thing about them in the back of the book, which I read when I finished the book. And it's a non-profit press publishing mainly work by Asian writers translated into a variety of Englishes. This is an artistic project for the benefit of readers who would not otherwise have access to the work, including ourselves. We publish what we find personally compelling. So they were founded in 2015, so they've been going for 10 years. And they also have like really good policies around translation work and making sure that translators are adequately financially supported for their very important work. So anyway, that was a little side quest, but something that I discovered about this press through reading this book, and I was very impressed with that concept and the basis of that company. Anyway, let's talk about the book now. So Strange Beasts of China is a really interesting book. It was bamboozling at times, so I really was not 100% sure what was going on sometimes. So this was part fantasy, and I would also describe it as part noir detective novel, like it's noir fiction. And it was very intriguing from the beginning. So in this book, we follow a character who is a writer, and she is writing about the strange beasts of China. And these are sort of human-like creatures who, and each chapter is focused around a different type of beast. And they're always described in terms of, they have this, like, you know, they have green scales or blah, 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 whatever the description is. Otherwise, they are basically the same as humans. So that's kind of the premise of the book. And then she's kind of relating these stories of her encounters with these different types of beasts. However, it is it's not a series of short stories, which is what it kind of maybe appeared to be at the very beginning because of the kind of episodic nature. I guess it is kind of like little episodes, really, but there is a threading narrative, and there are, you know, there's a thread of what happens. You couldn't read them out of order, is what I'm trying to say, I guess. Like, you definitely, there is a thread, a linear thread that goes through these little episodes, and it is building to something at the end. And I found it really fascinating. Let me just check my notes to see if there's anything else I really want to say about this. I don't think so. I was very satisfied by the ending of this. It was great. I really enjoyed it. 4 stars. Great. A great choice. And I personally think that the country of China and their literary culture has been redeemed. Okay. The next book that I read in the month of July was another author that I heard speak at the South Coast Readers and Writers Festival, and that is, and I have completely forgotten the pronunciation of her first name. It's spelt like the name Eileen, but it's not. I think it's either Eileen or Eileen, I think. Chong. And she is a poet, and she is, I believe, based in the South Coast area, if I'm not mistaken. I may be. This is a single poem, again, episodic, I guess you could say, and her intention is that you can read them kind of start at any point. You don't actually have to start at the beginning. I did start at the beginning because that's just how my brain works, and I moved my way through each of the episodes. It's kind of broken up into 101, I think. Yes, 101 sort of, I guess, sub-poems as part of the overarching poem. And the theme of it is, the inspiration for this book was that the poet's grandfather, who was her last grandparent, passed away, I want to say in Singapore? Overseas anyway, and it happened during lockdown. So they weren't able to go to do her kind of like cultural and, ritual, activities that you would normally do following somebody passing away. And so that sort of prompted reflection, I suppose, and a lot of these poems kind of came out of that time and or these sub-poems, I should say, have come out of that time and kind of have, broadly worked together to sort of be the ritual, I guess, in place of what normally would happen. But this was excellent. I really enjoyed this. I think quite powerful as a poem. She calls them fragments, that's right. So 101 fragments, and you can see I have tabbed quite a few of them, of the fragments that I particularly, that resonated with me. I overall really, really loved it. And I have written down a couple of little quotes from it that really resonated with me. So this is from fragment 9, and it says, "What does it mean for a life when you know you will be no one's ancestor?" That was a really poignant moment for me reading that fragment, because I don't have children and I'm not planning to have children. So that really made me stop and think. And then from fragment 100, I noted down, "How do you put down roots in stolen country?" Quite. And from fragment 101, "In the beginning there was you, no end to this grief, to our love," which I really loved. So this was beautiful and I would highly recommend. I gave it 4.5 stars. Okay, now we move into a couple of books that I really didn't like. And the first one I read from this, but I also listened to the Elijah Wood actually reading this book, and that is Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain. I'm going to hold it that way because that's where it says. This is nothing to you because it's a blank. Huckleberry Finn. My first comment that I've written in my notes is, "Well, I sure did hear Elijah Wood drop the N-bomb an F-ton of times." Gosh, it said a lot in this book. And I think, to look at that performance in the audiobook, I think he did a good job of accents, although I'm not from the south of America, so I don't really know whether he accurately did those voices, but to me they sounded pretty good in the different kind of the different accents that he kind of employed as Huck and Jim went down the river to different locations. So I think he did a good job of the accents. That would be my praise for the performance. The performance itself was good, but they actually just say the N word whenever it comes up, and that was really confronting to me, which I'm sure it would be to a lot of people, especially because Elijah Wood is a white person. So, also, I didn't realize that Huckleberry Finn is actually a sequel, kind of, to Tom Sawyer, which I haven't read also, but he turns up in this book, and God, he's an awful child. Yeah, and the absolute nonsense that he puts Jim through at the end of the book for no reason. It was absolutely infuriating. And also, one of the other things that really stuck out to me, and anyone else who has read this will probably know what I'm about to say, is the feelings that Huck has about assisting Jim to escape. And that's the moral dilemma for him, because, yeah, anyway, that was a lot. It was an adventure, for sure. I'm definitely glad it's over. And the purpose of me reading Huckleberry Finn, because I can't say that it was a classic that particularly appealed to me to read, generally speaking, but the reason I wanted to read it is so that I could read the book James and understand the references. So now I can do that. So that will be coming up hopefully at some point before the end of this year, reading the book James. So mission accomplished. Glad it's over. 2 stars. Hated it. The next book that I hated, did not like at all, was this one. Sorry, that's not entirely true. I didn't hate it, but I didn't like it. And it is Chinese Postman by Brian Castro. This was... okay, what I've written in my notes is, which is what's just made me giggle, this was mostly literary wank. Using big words for no good reason. So there's not a lot of plot in this book. This is told from the perspective of an old man who is sort of thinking back on his life, but also he is communicating with a Ukrainian woman over the internet, and he's having some feelings about that. She's not giving him any reason really to have those feelings, but he is having those feelings. And I just found him sleazy and unlikable as a character, and I didn't enjoy spending time inside his head as a result of that. He makes some droll statements also that seem quite clever on the surface, but if you think about them for 5 seconds more, you're like, that doesn't actually mean anything. Yeah, so he's saying all of these things that are essentially meaningless. It was not an enjoyable read. This was nominated for and shortlisted for the Miles Franklin Literary Award this year. And again, I'm really struggling with the Miles Franklin, I have to say, because there just seems to be, some years the right book gets to the top or gets into that short list, and then other years you're just like, what is this? Like, who is reading this and enjoying this? And I think in terms of this book in particular, that was my feeling. This was not the kind of thing that I feel has as much literary merit as the judges seem to be giving it. So anyway, do not recommend. I gave it 2.5 stars. I didn't hate it all the time, but it was a real slog to get through. And I'm just glad it's over. Glad it's over. So now we move back into the enjoyable part of of this review of the books that I read in July, because I picked up this was a reread for me, a children's book in verse called Cloud Busting by Malorie Blackman. She's a UK author, I believe, and I read this book some years ago before I ever tracked my reading, so I don't have a record of when I read it, which means it was probably like more than 10 years ago. But this is, as I said, a novel in verse, and I really enjoyed it the first time that I read it. To the point where I've been thinking about it and like recommending it to children. And I did enjoy this again, but it wasn't as 5-star as I'd kind of remembered it to be. And I think again, it probably is something that for kids might be more 5-star. Not that I read this as a kid. I don't know. Anyway, I did enjoy it. I gave it 4 stars. And basically, we follow a boy who is, the very first part of the book is sitting in class, and the teacher has given them an assignment to basically write a poem about any topic. And he wants to write the poem. He says he wants to write it about a boy called, I think his name is Davy. And everybody just kind of freezes and is like, why would you want to write a poem about Davy? And then we go on to find out more information about that. It turns out that Davy is a boy who was attending their school, no longer attending their school. And I won't spoil what happens in case you're going to read it. But yeah, we sort of find out the ins and outs of what happened to Davy and why he is no longer at the school. And it's, I think, to me, I liked the fact that it didn't, it resolved, but it wasn't, not everything was wrapped up in a neat little box at the end of this book. And I think, in particular, that's an important lesson for kids to learn, that sometimes apologizing for things is not enough to fix them. It's a good thing to do, but sometimes the damage is done and there's not much else you can do about that. So I think that was a really good message of this book. So I would recommend it. I really liked it. I gave it 4 stars, as I said. It just wasn't quite what I remembered it to be from reading it like 10 plus years ago. Okay. I have 2 more books to show you, but I actually only finished 1 more book in the month of July, and I'll explain what's going on with the other book when we get to it. But this was technically the last book that I finished in the month of July, and it is The Nightmare Sequence by Omar Sakr and Safdar Ahmed, with an introduction by George Abraham. This is a poetry collection and also a collection of images. So Omar Sakr is a poet. I've read Omar Sakr before. Omar Sakr was also speaking at the South Coast Readers and Writers Festival, which is why I purchased this book. Actually, I had already had it on, had my eye on it, but I purchased it at the festival for him to sign it, which he did. And he wrote, "Keep up the good fight. Our humanity depends on it," which I thought was a very good message. But this is essentially, as I said, a collection of poems by Omar Sakr, and then the illustrations are by Safdar Ahmed. I had not heard of him before, but he also spoke at the festival, but I didn't actually see their session. I only heard a poetry reading session with Omar Sakr. Anyway, this is about Palestine and the genocide that is happening there currently. And I have spoken about Palestine because it's come up in several of the books that I've read before. I have not been clear enough in talking about those books previously of my stance on Palestine. Not that I think that everybody needs to do that, but I feel a little challenged and called out a little bit by this book to be clearer about that, because I have been using euphemistic language to describe, I've been saying things like the situation in Gaza and so on, instead of calling it what it is, which is a genocide that is occurring in our lifetime. So just in case anyone was unclear from me being euphemistic in the past, my stance is I am against it. And I am deeply saddened and distraught by what I have learnt about what has happened, what is currently happening, and what has historically happened in that part of the world. Let me talk about the book. This is a response, a poetic and visual response to the genocide that is occurring right now in Palestine. And this book felt really, it was really moving and devastating at the same time. I'm just going to go back to my notes just to make sure I'm clear about what I'm saying. I've written, it's a poignant collection of poems from Omar Sakr. And I've also written, and I truly believe we are truly privileged to live in the same time as him and to be reading his words in the time that they're being written, rather than in the future. My only slight complaint about this book is that the images, I didn't necessarily know what I was looking at in some of these images, because there's no description underneath. But as I finished the book, I realized, because I came to it, that there is a notes on art section, and it's at the back of the book. And I think I would have really appreciated either knowing that that was there so that I could be referring to it as I went, or for those notes to actually just sit with the images, or maybe for that notes section to happen at the front end of the book so that I was aware and could refer. So that would be my only complaint about it, is that is at the back and I didn't know it was there. Because once I did read that, I understood more what I was seeing in those images, and I could respond accordingly. So that would be my only complaint about the book, and it's the only reason I didn't give it 5 stars, so I gave it 4.5. Yeah, and that was just because I spent a lot of time not understanding what I was seeing. But with that clarification, this is an absolutely vital book, and I would highly recommend it to anybody. And I think it's a call to humanity, really, and to really checking in and learning about what is going on, and thinking about what steps that you can take to do something. I don't know what the solution is, nor is it really my place to offer a solution, but to at the very least, yeah. So, poignant, moving, highly recommended. Okay. That was technically the last book that I read in July, but I'm now recording this on the 2nd of August, and on the 1st of August, I did finish another book, and I'm going to talk to you about it now, because it's a pertinent book to talk about right this minute, and I figured I might as well, because I have actually finished it, and that is Ghost Cities by Siang. The reason this is a pertinent book to talk about is because it was the winner of the Miles Franklin Literary Award for this year, and so I wanted to give my review of it as soon as possible. So I'm going to do that now, and then I'll just briefly mention it when we come to wrap up August. So this is a funny book. It's amusing. It's a book that it's unexpected in terms of it being the winner of a literary prize, in my opinion. It's interesting as well. So we have two timelines in this book. We follow a character who is an Australian-born person who is of Chinese descent, and he works as a translator. But it turns out he can't actually speak Chinese, and he's been using Google Translate, which his bosses know, and very early on in the book he gets called out on it and fired from his job, and rightly so. So that's the first timeline, and that's in the modern day. We are following this timeline of this man. It blows up. He has an encounter with this very enigmatic, kind of crazy director from China who is known as Baby Bao, and he he shoots this guy to fame under the hashtag of #Bad Chinese, and #Bad Chinese blows up on Chinese media. And everybody knows who this guy is, and he can't really escape the legacy of his of what has happened. This leads to a series of events that happen. He ends up going to China with Baby Bao to a ghost city. And the ghost city is based on this real thing that has happened in China, where the Chinese government build infrastructure with the view to it being populated later. And they call them ghost cities because nobody lives there. They're just these empty cities, which are kind of like a bit weird. So yeah, Baby Bao has set up one of these ghost cities as a constantly filming. He has people who are living there, but they're technically extras in any, so they sign away to be extras in the movies that are kind of filming all the time, and they have to always be acting whenever that happens. And as you might expect throughout the book, that gets increasingly invasive and Big Brother-esque as the book goes on. So that's one timeline. The other timeline is, we are following an ancient Chinese emperor who is one of those characters that is at the same time ridiculous and horrifically cruel. And he is wreaking havoc with the people, and with the hierarchies and the structures of the government, parallels to current timelines, I suppose we could say. He ends up, we sort of follow him and his kind of increasing paranoia and the kind of increasingly crazy actions that he takes to try and kind of maintain his power and eliminate people who might, from his family, who might challenge his authority and his emperorship. Yeah, so those are the two timelines. They don't overly intersect, but I think they kind of speak to each other more than anything else. And you sort of start to see some parallels with Baby Bao and in the modern timeline and the Emperor in the ancient timeline. And overall, I would say I enjoyed this book. I thought it was, as I said, quite amusing to read. The writing in many points is very good. Where it fell down a little bit for me, and this is where a lot of books fall down for me, is when author inserts become obvious. And in this case, it is characters who are speaking in ways or thinking in ways that don't seem in line with the character that we've been introduced to. So whether that's an issue of the writing of the character, so therefore, you know, maybe it was the intention of the author that this is how they would speak and the kinds of things that they would say and think about, but he hasn't done the work to adequately create that character, or whether it is just a case of wanting to insert these kind of like quotable quotes. And I've tabbed one. Yeah, so he says, this is a thing that the main character is thinking. What I was on the cusp of saying to her then, on the street, halfway between the gallery and the ruins of the neighbouring canton, and what I did say to her eventually, much, much later, once after emerging from the shower, brow furrowed, eyes down, because it is much easier to remember the order of words like that, a mini speech practised in my head, was this. If you are living a life aligned towards art, the making of it, the receiving of it, then the patterns you leave in your wake, whether you are aware of them or not, whether you intend them to be or not, will be indistinguishable from the art itself. Which is a cool philosophical thing to say, but it's not in line at all with the character, in my opinion. At least not as it's been written and has come across to me. The other things that irritated me a little bit about this book was I felt like the love interest character in the modern timeline was a little bit undercooked. And generally speaking, I would say female characters in this book are enigmatic and therefore unknowable. And it really just sort of, at the end of the book, I was just like, I just don't really feel like I know this character at all. And she features quite heavily in the book. So yeah, that was another issue that kind of popped up for me. And I think I am being more critical of this book because it won. And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know if this was the right book to win. Especially when you had a very good book in Theory and Practice by Michelle de Kretzer, which I have previously read and reviewed on the channel, which was also in the shortlist, and I think was a little bit better than this book. It didn't have the same... It also had problems, but the problems were not as bad as in this one. And then the other thing was that the ending didn't really land for me in the way I think it was intended by the author, so it just didn't quite work. It resolved, but it didn't feel... The pacing of that ending wasn't quite right, in my opinion. I am being overly critical because it won a prize, I think, but that was my experience with the book. I gave it 3.75 stars, so I didn't hate it. I actually really liked it. But yeah, it did have some problems, so I'm not 100% convinced that it was the winner, in my mind at least. I still have a few more books from the shortlist to read, so we'll see once I've read those whether I think anything else kind of drifts to the top for me. So anyway, that's it. I did technically finish this in August, but I finished it like the morning of the 1st of August. So I'm including it here, and I will very briefly just mention it when I come to wrap up August as well. So that's it. That is my month of July plus an extra day. And those are the books that I've read. Let me just flip them here. Whoop. This is it. This is the stack. So coming back to my question from the beginning of the video, was this a successful reading month or no? I'm going to tend towards it being yes, successful, because even though I had 2 duds in amongst the rest of them, I pushed through and got them read, and also I did have some really great books that I picked up otherwise that were mostly 4 or 4.5 stars, which I think is pretty decent. So I'm gonna call it a successful month. Not just because I finished 7 books, but because And yes, I know I'm holding 8, but this one technically is in August. But I finished 7 books, which is good, but I think also the quality of some of those books was really quite high. So yeah, I'm gonna call it a win. Thank you so much for watching this video. Let me know down in the chat below in the comments whether you've read any of these books and you have opinions you'd like to share about them, or if maybe any of these books have sparked your interest and you would like to pick them up yourself. I'd love to hear all about it down in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one. Bye!